What's up, everyone? Welcome to episode 17 of UXR Conversations. There are many terms we as researchers use for the topic of today's conversation. You might call it strategic research. You might call it foundational research. You might call it evaluative research. Exploratory research, of course, or generative research. See, even I'm confused about what you call it. But whatever the term you use, it's often something that we as UX researchers aspire to do. And why is that? Well, if you conduct foundational research, and let's call it foundational research for now, then you are probably diving deep into people's lives and you are figuring out people's greatest struggles and needs, and you're uncovering those crucial things you need to uncover. And then you can probably have more impact on people's lives, and also more impact on the teams you're working on, the companies you're part of, with your stakeholders. It's a win-win situation. Everyone wins. But how do you identify these strategic research opportunities in the first place? It's not easy. How do you go beyond the kind of basic research, usability studies, and other such things? If you are striving to have more impact as a researcher and conduct these more strategic studies, you have come to the right conversation. So welcome. And thank you if you've joined us today live, or if you're joining us afterwards. I'm Noam Segal. I'm Director of User Research at Wealthfront when I'm not on parental leave. And I've started this YouTube channel thingamajig with a bunch of conversations with talented and incredible people who I'm honored to have joined me. If you want to watch those and a bunch more content, then check out my YouTube channel below. And I am very happy to have Kelly Moran join me in the studio. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Noam. I'm so excited to be here.
It's really good to have you. You are one of my anthropologist colleagues and friends, and you chose to apply your anthropology craft in technology. You've done the consulting route. These days, you are a senior UX researcher at Google. You've also been writing on Medium and sharing important insights on Twitter. So if you want to follow Kelly, these are her deets, and we will put them up later as well. So I want to ask you something before we kind of dive deep into strategic research. I am a psychologist. You are an anthropologist.
Yes.
I have been wondering, because I know a few incredible anthropology trained researchers. Do you have like a secret anthropologist UX researcher group where you mock sociologists and psychologists like me and kind of joke around and stuff? Is there like a secret group for anthropologists, or is that not a thing?
It would not be a secret if I shared it, and I don't know if I can. I will tell you, though,
okay,
when it comes to interdisciplinary struggles and conflicts, in my master's program, the anthropology department shared an office with sociology, and apparently we were in anthropology responsible for maintaining the copier. And one day I was in there trying to fix the copier, and someone came in and she said, "Don't worry about that. Anthropology will take care of it." But then we would blame sociology for breaking it because of all their surveys. So that's where we get.
That's a good story.
I get more tension with sociology than with psychology.
So that's good to know. And is that your tagline to this day? Like when someone approaches a bunch of researchers at Google asking for something, do you say, "Don't worry, anthropology will take care of it"? Or do you not use that?
It's a good one. I should use that more often.
You should. So I think it's helpful for people, before we jump into what strategic research is and how do you do it, just to get a quick recap of your professional journey so far, so people understand how you got to where you are in the first place. Can you give us the 1-minute version of your career track?
Yeah, 1 minute. So I, after I did my bachelor's degree in anthropology, I couldn't figure out what to do with myself, so I joined Peace Corps, which is one way of spending some time. It's a great place to be. They've unfortunately been evacuated for now, but you should look into Peace Corps if you're looking for to do post college. And in Peace Corps, I started to feel like I wasn't sure what anthropology really could do to help the world. And eventually I realized that there's this thing called applied anthropology, that was the whole point, and that there were actually programs that would help you make that connection between an anthropological way of looking at things and of solving problems and of helping people. And so applied to a master's program, did a lot of great work where I got to work with other organizations while I was in grad work. After that, got a job working as a staff ethnographer for an investigative firm. Quickly moved into a usability firm where I actually got to do my first test of usability, my first kind of touch with actual usability, actually working in technology. Then moved into healthcare, where what we say it was a technology company that didn't realize it was a technology company. And we were doing UX, although that's not what we were calling it. And then I got into consulting.
What were you calling it?
What were we calling it? We called it implementation management.
That sounds terrible.
Which sounds terrible. Well, they say that healthcare is 10 years behind any trend, and so they were catching up with the lingo.
It's really alarming. It's alarming that of all areas of work and fields, it's healthcare.
I know.
10 years behind.
It is.
I find that very disturbing.
Yeah, but like Lean Six Sigma came like 10 years after everything else. Agile is now like a thing in healthcare. They're just a little bit behind on those processes. So, but from there, I got into consulting with a firm called Project 202 based in Dallas. And I worked there for about 5 years. And then loved consulting a lot, loved the breadth that I got to work on, but then started to feel like I really wanted to work more deeply in something, and opportunity came up with Google. And so I joined in the end of 2018 and have been very excited to be working there and doing lots of work with smart people.
Awesome.
Did I make a minute? Was it longer than a minute?
I'm not really counting, so you're good. You're good. So we are talking about identifying these strategic, these foundational, generative, whatever research opportunities. If you have any questions or comments on this topic, please comment on wherever you're at. YouTube probably works best, but it's your choice. So let's speak the same language before we dive into this. What's your framework, how you think about different types of research and where they're placed?
Yeah, so currently we talk about foundational research versus evaluative research. And then we also sometimes talk about iterative research, which for me is just evaluative research that's on kind of like a steroid plan. But when we talk about foundational research, we talk about the stuff that's not about making sure people can use the thing. It's making sure that the thing is the right thing, making sure that there is a place for it in their lives. We have lots of smart technology people who can do all kinds of fancy things. And what you need a researcher to be able to do is say, what is the problem that this fancy thing solves? And helping teams figure that out and see where that can fit in someone's natural life is what we do when we do that kind of foundational or that strategic work.
And who's doing that? So whether it's at Google or elsewhere from your previous experiences, are there certain researchers who are foundational researchers, or is everyone doing mixed research in the same way that in many companies, people are doing mixed methods?
Yeah. It really depends. People tend to specialize, and it seems to somewhat break down onto what your background is, how you came into the field. As an anthropologist, the foundational research is just really in line with the skills that I used as an anthropologist. And as I said, I got that first job working usability. That was my first taste of it. And I really had to learn on the job because those skills weren't taught in my program. And so you have other programs like HCI that seem to be more specialized in that, and that's their more natural fit. I think having a good research mindset, though, you can do either, and they are good skills to have because to support a product, you do need both. And it's helpful if you can be the person that can flex between the two, and importantly, to know when one or the other is needed. And one of the best ways you can know when you need foundational or strategic research is you attend all the team meetings, you do the workshops with them, you listen in when they're having conversations. And I tell people you listen for moments of conflict or tension. And so actually a lot of times your trigger point for needing foundational research is not something you see with the user, it's something you see with the team. It's you see that the team is not understanding something. They're debating where this fits in someone's life. They're saying, well, there's 4 use cases, and someone else goes, no, there's just 3 use cases, and someone else goes, no, there's 5 use cases. And you go, tell me all these use cases, let's outline them. And then you go back and you go, okay, so how am I going to figure out, are we on track? What's really happening? Because the team itself obviously doesn't have the foundational knowledge that they need to even outline where this product fits in their users' lives.
I have so many questions about this because, well, I'm a researcher too. But I'll choose one. Is there foundational research where, so you mentioned identifying these tensions within the team rather than the user's life, which is super interesting to me. But I'm wondering whether sometimes research has to happen without that tension, because if that tension exists, it means the team is already debating something, they're working on something, the idea is already planted in their mind. Do you think it's our role as researchers to do research that's so early, so foundational, that really most people in the team haven't even thought that this is something they should be working on? Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. No, and that is a rare skill, to be able to be that visionary with what you do. So yes, it is needed. And a lot of times it's hard to find support for, right? Because your team isn't seeing it yet. They don't have any idea how it can happen yet. And the way I've encountered in the past has been to happen upon it. I haven't been good at predicting it where it might occur. It's more when you're in the field and you're talking to people and it's something tangential to what you're actually looking at. And you go, well, that's interesting. There's no solution for that. There's something that's missing there. And being better at being able to vision out and predict that is a wonderful skill that I don't know if I've honed, but it's a good development thing to work on.
I agree. And I also think that usually when I've done research, I've encountered these, to your point, like these tangential things that kind of pop up, right? It's rare that you don't encounter something like that, and you have to pay attention to it, and you have to consider kind of whether there's something to do with this, or if it's just a small detail in the larger landscape of things you found out. But interesting, because I think about this a lot, and about whether it's even our role and our realm, our lane, whatever you want to call it, to identify these really early opportunities, or whether that's in someone else's court. So we can leave that question for another time.
I think that's an excellent one that I would love to see you talk with someone about. I would absolutely watch and ping you questions.
If anyone wants to volunteer for that one, that's going to be a controversial conversation, I believe.
I agree.
You also mentioned the skills and how you gain the skills necessary for doing this. I think lots of people watching this will be asking themselves, well, what skills are you talking about? You know, what can I learn? What programs are better suited to conducting this foundational research that I'm interested in doing in my career, and better sooner than later? So can we unpack what these skills are and how you ended up, you know, leveling up on those particular skills?
Yeah. So coming from anthropology, I leverage skills like being able to relate to people quickly, being able to understand and pick up on trends in their unique world, being able to pick up on language. These are also great business skills to have, by the way. Every time I start a new job, I am anthropologist in overdrive as I understand the landscape of where I am. Another skill that's really, really important, particularly for, as we mentioned, spotting these tangential things and figuring out, is that just a weird little nuance over here, or is that something I should pay attention to? That skill, being able to look across large amounts of information. And when I say large amounts of information, I don't mean like data science amounts of information, but large amounts of qualitative information. Which is in memory storage on your computer is not a lot, but in human ability to comprehend large amounts of information and summarize them down and see where are those themes. That is an important skill. That's a huge skill that I use all the time. Being able, you know, I have a huge amount of input coming into my brain and saying, here are the 4 major things that I'm seeing happening, and then pursue those, and find the support that you need for that within the data. See if there is support for it, right? There's always that little bit of bias that you can have, that you might see something once and put more emphasis on it than is appropriate. So being able to check yourself, like, is this just me, or is this actually here in the data? Being able to understand what people are getting at when they're having those moments of conflict and tension, being able to understand, like, what's at root happening here. I feel like that's a big anthropology skill, going back to, working with groups of people that are different than you, and works on conflict and tension. Being able to sit down and stare at your data for a long time. I feel like there's a personal skill of being able to sit in your data. I've worked with sometimes people who are aspiring to get into research, and they go, oh, that part where I have to sit and read the interview transcript is just so boring. That's a bad sign. If that's hard for you, it might be that research isn't quite the thing for you. Maybe still you can work in something near it, but actually, like, digging in, you've got to love that, like, digging into those interviews and reading them multiple times.
I agree big time. And I want to give a shout out to Bezod from Slack, who was on a previous episode of UXR Conversations. He published this graphic on LinkedIn today, which kind of blew my mind. I think it was so simple and so elegant and so true. And it was comparing researchers to athletes, which is funny because I'm not an athlete by any measure. But the idea was that conducting the research, as in doing the interviews, or in an athlete's case, performing in a live event, doing the 100-meter sprint, that's a very small part of what we do. And everything before and after that, that's most of our work, and it's invisible, and it's the preparation and the planning, and it's the synthesis and sitting in your data and diving deep. And I love that point. And I would add to it that it's sitting in your data afterwards. It's also, collecting a lot of even secondary data, because the problems that people are experiencing in their lives, there are a multitude of indicators for those, and many of them are just out there waiting for you. And I think one of the techniques I've used to identify those problems is to just go to as many places as I can, either online or in the real world, to see whether there are indicators that those problems exist, before I ever do a single interview or survey or any other type of primary research. So, but I love
don't do research that's been done. If it's out there, leverage that and go the next step.
Yeah. I think we often forget that. So what is? Well, actually, before we get to that, do you have any tips or advice on how to gain the skills that you mentioned, on how to level up on those skills? So if these are the skills that are worth really improving on, building on, how do I do that? Is this about getting a master's or a PhD in anthropology? Is this about taking some other class? Is this about something else?
Yeah, that's hard. I'm definitely biased because I came through with a academic program. And I came through in a time when there really weren't other ways of learning it. I got my master's in 2007. So there weren't other options, really. HDI was a thing, but that was it. And it was much more bounded where it was. And so it's hard for me to fairly evaluate some of these programs that aren't academic based. And I realize that. I've definitely met some researchers who have made excellent and elegant transitions. I've seen them come out of journalism and just do beautifully. And I've seen them come out of design and do really well. So it's super hard. And there's all these programs out there now. There's boot camps and certifications, and I'm skeptical of many of them, which doesn't mean that I'm right to be skeptical of them. But my tendency is to think that an academic program will give you the discipline that you need, the thoroughness, right? Checking and doing that research in the background, making sure that your due diligence is done. I also think that the ethical teaching that you typically get in an academic program tends to be stronger. Sometimes ethical things can just get conflated as legal things, and ethics and legal are not the same. They're both important. But I feel like that can get left off certain programs. But then there also was a big push for ethics recently, so maybe that's changed. How was your transition? Did you know that you were going to be doing this when you were doing your psychology studies?
I did not. My career path is, well, it's just as interesting as anyone else's, I guess. I mean, every single researcher has a fascinating path, and no two are the same.
So true.
I started my UX-ish career. We didn't call it UX either.
Right.
When I was helping to design, research missile defense systems back in Israel. And this was after my military service where I was operating missile defense systems. And this could not be a more different context than the one I'm in today. So I did have some industry experience-ish, I guess you could call it. I struggle with it because, again, it's such a different environment before I got into the PhD program. And when I was there, at first I was considering an academic track and also maybe other opportunities that aren't UX. I just realized that I love technology and I love research, and UX research is exactly the marriage of technology and research. So why look elsewhere? And I will say to your point that I gained a ton of helpful, relevant skills for both foundational research and otherwise in the PhD program. And I do not regret a single moment there. But also to your point, I think that there are certain things like narrative building, storytelling that journalists, for example, are experts at, and that makes them potentially great researchers when it comes to foundational research, because a lot of that is how you can then share the narrative around that and really make everyone, the stakeholders, the leaders, feel that pain, that problem that exists, that is unsolved, in a way that inspires the rest of the team to take action in the right direction. So it's complicated, and I'm not sure if there's certainly not a single path that's relevant, but I'm glad we talked about it.
Yeah, I absolutely think that the journalism, that storytelling, you can do the best research and it doesn't matter at all if you can't put it into some kind of format that speaks to people.
Yeah. So I don't know if there's this kind of magical approach you have, which just, makes everything great, and you can just like spit out foundational research right and left. But if you do have a particular approach for identifying these key opportunities, it would be nice to hear, I think, for everyone. Do you have a particular framework or approach for this? Maybe something from previous work, or how you do things at Google? I know that there are several research frameworks that came out of Google, and thank you, Google, for that, which we all use in the industry. Is there a framework for foundational research?
That's a great question. I should develop one and put it out there.
Please do.
I would say that the process is to get to know your stakeholders and your project partners really closely, and to consider them, like I said, a research project of your own. What do they know? What's important to them? Because again, your research isn't going to be useful if it doesn't matter to them. If you've gone off on your own tangent and you're doing research for the sake of pure research, that's cool, but you're probably working within a company, so it's not like you can even publish it. So it's just going to sit somewhere in a shared company drive. So you need to be doing research that matters to your stakeholders, and that means getting to know them, spending time with them. Right now, no one's spending time with anyone in person. So scheduling those one-on-ones and those coffee chats, and just talking with the people that you're supposed to be working with, seeing how they interpret a problem, or what's the framework they apply to the product. And then, as I said, you look for those moments of conflict and tension where are two stakeholders describing something very differently. That's your opportunity to say, well, can I put user-based research behind this in a way that upholds one framework or another, or that speaks to a new framework that we hadn't considered. And what evidence can I find that solves this problem that's sort of maybe simmering below the surface that nobody will tell you about if you do a structured stakeholder interview, which are very important, but which won't always get you into where is that strategic, foundational, generative, exploratory research really needed.
I have a feeling this will be an important point coming out of this conversation, which is when early career researchers especially approach me and ask about what they can do to break into the field or grow in the field, often the questions are around tools or skills that I can learn for myself, for my independent work as a researcher. And I think the relationships you build with your stakeholders are absolutely crucial, especially if you want to conduct foundational research. You have to do research essentially with your stakeholders at a very high level and build meaningful relationships with product design, data science, engineering, marketing, and everyone else in order to get this right. And I'm not sure people realize this often enough, that relationships are such a big part of what we do, especially if you want to do this type of research, to your point. So I hope there's more conversations around that. Obviously, it's very hard to kind of grow when it comes to relationships. I think we're all trying, both in our professional and personal lives. And I'm not aware of any awesome classes at Stanford or wherever that teach relationship building. But you have to start somewhere, and just recognizing the importance of it, I think, is a good start. We have a question here, or a couple of questions from Tong Shin. So I would love to bring those up right now and take a little break from our conversation. Hi, Noam and Kerry. Thanks so much for your sharing. I'm Tong, and I'm wondering whether or how you see different disciplines like anthropology and HCI contribute to UX. What do you think about comparing these more dedicated HCI programs with broader, more academic programs like the ones we were part of?
Yeah. So, and I hope not to misrepresent HCI because it's not what I studied, but from what I know, it is designed to graduate you into a career in working in industry, whereas anthropology in itself typically is not. Applied anthropology is now a recognized subdiscipline, and that's a goal. But it doesn't tend to, I don't know if it sets you up as well for a life in a professional industry, although the programs are evolving and growing. Yeah, differences between the two disciplines is hard to tell. Yeah, I mean, I know people who came through HCI. One of my favorite anthropologists who came through HCI, though, ended up getting her master's degree in sociology. So felt like she needed to expand on
Traitor.
that. Yeah, I actually like her tons. So she just didn't know to think of anthropology, so it's fine. I didn't know her yet. Yeah, I don't know enough about the HCI programs these days. I know where it came from. I know it started more in like aviation, I believe. So maybe it might have been something that you were more exposed to.
Yeah, I mean, there are some incredible HCI programs right now. One of the big ones, and it's just an incredible program, is at UW in Seattle, and Carnegie Mellon have an incredible HCI program. And I'm delighted that my alma mater back in Israel just opened an HCI program, which is a fantastic thing and still very rare in Israel. I think it's the only HCI program in Israel these days. I would say that HCI programs do a couple of things really well. First of all, they prepare you for a career in research or design, or maybe both. And I think for people who aren't quite sure whether they want to focus on design or research, it's a great choice for a program. And then the second thing is it's very focused on industry, which means you get much more exposure, I would say, to industry professionals, to the tools we use in industry, the sort of frameworks and thought processes we use in industry. And so it might be easier in that case to kind of land in a job and just get running and get working. I do think that in both master's and PhD programs in fields like anthropology or psychology, you gain a very deep understanding of research methods and in some cases statistics or ethnography or
Mhm.
whatever it is, depending on the program, and the level of just rigor and the depth of your education is far beyond any other program can provide. But it really depends on your career goals and aspirations and what program works for you. PhD programs in particular are long and difficult, and it's a financial price to pay and a mental health price to pay and many other things. So tough decision. If anyone is not sure which path they'd like to take, then you know how to reach me, or if not, I'll put my details on again in the end, and I'd love to chat because I do know a bit about both paths. Um, we also had a question from Tong around: is there kind of a universal framework for UX researchers despite their backgrounds? I would say straight off the bat that there are a lot of frameworks for UX research, and they have nothing to do with your background. So you can learn them whatever you studied, wherever you came from. Just as an example, one framework I've used in the past is, and currently as well, is Jobs to Be Done,
Yeah.
which is a well-known framework in the realm of UX research, maybe originally more from the marketing side. And you can apply that framework regardless of your background. There are countless resources these days to learn those frameworks. So I don't look at UX research frameworks as being directly related to your background. The only relationship I see is that if these frameworks are more on the qualitative side or more on the quantitative side, then depending on your training and your skills, you might have trouble applying certain frameworks without, learning some additional skills that you don't have. For example, if a framework requires a lot of kind of stuff on the quantitative side and a deep understanding of statistics or machine learning or whatever it is, then probably if you're an anthropologist, maybe a psychologist, maybe a sociologist, depending on what you studied, you might not be able to address those questions using that. Anything to add, Kelly?
Yeah, I will say that the academic background and, as you said, the really deep knowledge and research helps me, I believe, adopt new frameworks really easily. Because, like you said, there are a lot of frameworks and different places have different favorites. But understanding the basics of how research works and how you go from scoping a problem, like identifying a problem, defining it, scoping it, finding something that will work, and carrying it through into something that has meaning. Having that academic rigor helps when someone says, "Hey, have you ever run a whatever test?" I can do some really quick reading and go, "Oh, I see what they're doing here. Like I understand why this step happens after this step," and I can piece it together. And I've been able to learn new techniques really, really fast. One day in my previous job, my director came up and said, "Do you know how to do a Kano study?" And I said, "Hold on a second." And I did some really quick reading and said, "Okay, I see what they're getting at. So give me a little bit of time to do some background." And I found some academic papers on it. I found some case studies on it, and I pieced it together, and I became the Kano expert in the company. And I've written about the Kano method, and it's because I was able to put it together and go, "Oh, I see why this is happening this way."
Yeah.
And so flexibility with frameworks becomes really, really important, because every place I've worked has had different favorite. Jobs to be done is very big in some places. Other places hate jobs to be done. Personas are huge in one area. Oh, personas are the worst thing ever. There's a lot of opinions, and being able to make something useful out of them is very important.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Tong, for your questions. Really appreciate it. My most loyal viewer, Tiana X, thank you again for your questions, as always, is asking, could you please share about your insights about the role of UX research in the company, how to be proactive rather than reactive? Is it rare for UX research to launch a project? I think this question speaks to foundational research, because there's something about this topic which speaks to whether you're being reactive or proactive and who's launching it. Would you agree? And what's it like these days at Google or elsewhere that you've been when it comes to this tension between being more proactive or more reactive?
I think it's a great question, Tiana. Thank you. And I think it's on the researcher to push themselves into a proactive role, unless that's something that they truly don't want. And they just, because there's always research to do. There'll always be like, test this thing, tell me which design is better. You could always, if you're comfortable, sit and wait for the research projects to come to you. If the organization values understanding the user, then they will. But if you want to have a more important role in the direction that the product is going, you will have to be proactive. And then, how frequent is it? That's hard to say at Google because there's like over 1,000 researchers, but there's like 100,000 employees. So I don't know all of them or all their situations, but it is on that researcher to build that proactive role. For me, it has been with working with my manager to get access to higher level stakeholders. So there's the people that you interact with frequently day to day and that you scope and build projects with and directly work with. And then there's those higher level people who are setting the direction and they're looking farther out and seeing, where the product will be going in 2 years, 5 years, and getting access to them and say, hey, I have a question that I think we can solve by talking to some users, talking to some customers. I'd like to take this approach. I think these are the things we might learn. And that's how you kind of get that buy-in from them. And then that trickles down from those higher level stakeholders to the stakeholders you're working with. And then they go, oh yeah, weren't you were talking about working on this thing, like this is exciting now, right? Like they didn't maybe understand the long-term vision of it at first because they're in that day to day. So it's like making those connections again with connections. With research, it's huge making connection because otherwise you can just sit back and just test the thing that they want you to test and make a report and test the next thing.
I totally agree. Foundational research is not something you do for the sprint that's happening now or anything short term, right? It's for the longer term roadmap. And to your point, gaining access to the people who have that on their minds, the more senior leaders, being proactive about that means you have a much better chance at running meaningful foundational projects that end up influencing the direction of the product. So it takes some work and maybe some boldness, but anyone can do it in theory. And obviously some organizations are better at encouraging that from everyone involved.
I say be noisy and be nosy. Right.
I love that.
Read all the stuff
noisy and be nosy.
Noisy and nosy and noisy. Read all the stuff that comes out, comment on it. Ask the people who wrote the document if they can walk you through it, and start building the connections in your brain that will help you see those opportunities for, hey, there's these, 2 projects that actually have the same deep-rooted question. If I do research on this, I can help both of these projects. Isn't that a great investment of my time?
I love that. That will be the quote of the day. I'm launching quote of the day. Sweet. Live on air, and this will be the first one. Be noisy and nosy.
Yes.
Thank you again, Tiana. We have one more question, which I think is important, and it's around working with stakeholders, specifically designers. Thank you for sharing so many gems with us. Thank you for watching, Vishal. Appreciate it. What's it like to collaborate with designers at Google? I know that at some smaller companies, designers and researchers share some responsibilities. In fact, in some smaller companies, there are no researchers and designers are doing the research in the really kind of small companies.
Yeah, so that's another hot topic for you to take on.
Oh, actually. Yeah, for sure.
A whole show.
But for the time being, what's it like to collaborate with designers at Google on these foundational projects? Sorry, what does that look like?
Yeah, it's great. I enjoy it a lot. I like that we have clearly defined roles, and we have a lot of opportunities to work. We do work together, and it's nice that I can find a designer and say, hey, I'm doing this research, and I'd love for you to be a part of it. Do you think you can, do you want to be in the setup for me? You want to help me scope it? Can you come sit in on some sessions? Can I get your feedback on it? I really enjoy that. We specialize quite a bit right now at Google, and I know some places, right, it's one role, which I have problems with, but I know other people have really, really strong opinions about designers should be doing all their own research. I feel like there's too much there for one person to do all of it really well. I'll say that now that we're towards the end of your show.
Yeah.
But I enjoy it. And in my previous work as well, we were specialized in research and design, and I always loved partnering with it. I feel like I'm most effective when I'm partnering closely with a designer, because they can help, and they can help me with that storytelling, and they can help me get that message out.
I agree, and I'm very fortunate to work with incredibly talented designers at Wealthfront. So, and they are all, each and every one of them, strategic thinkers, foundational thinkers. So, it's a very, it's a great part of working where I'm at as well. I have two more things I have to ask you before we end. One of them is, what are the mistakes that some of us might be making that are hindering our ability to conduct this type of research? Have you seen any like bad practices that we have to get rid of in order to enable us to succeed with these foundational research projects?
One is waiting for it to come to you, right? Sitting around and waiting for someone to be like, hey, I have this amazing research project and I've picked you. You need to be proactive. If you sit around, you won't get this work. Two would be not involving your stakeholders in the early phases. If your research is already scoped and planned and you're expecting them to be excited about it, they are not. You're going to have problems with them just not being interested. You're not going to get support if you're looking for someone to support you during the actual research phase, or if you're looking for an ear when you're in synthesis. It's this weird random project that you ran off and did on your own.
Yeah. I like both of those, especially the second point. I mean, it's such collaborative work these days, and it has to be, or it will not work out well for you. And yeah, to Tiana's question earlier, you have to be proactive in order to make these things happen. There is no other choice or other way of doing it, for sure. I also think there's something about, I'm not sure how to articulate it, but so you write on Medium, right? So you've done writing. You may agree that it's a bad idea to write and edit at the same time. You kind of have to step away from your writing for a bit and then do editing, in my opinion, or it's much harder to edit your work. I feel like it's a bit of the same stuff with the foundational research. You have to kind of step away for a bit, step away from the micro, the little picture to see the big picture. There's something about that which I try to do, and it can be hard, for example, when it's a normal week or year and you're in an actual office and not only working remotely from your home during a global pandemic, and you constantly have meetings and you're walking around the halls of Google or Wealthfront or wherever, and you just don't have the time to step back for a second, go to a different context. I mean, this is why we have offsites, right?
Yeah.
Well, sometimes offsites are about learning how to cook dim sum or something, but often offsites are exactly about this, about stepping back from the day to day. And I think that's so important for foundational research work. So I highly recommend taking that approach if you want to do it.
That's a fabulous tip. Yeah.
Thank you. There's just one more thing I wanted to talk about, because we are in a weird time right now with a global pandemic and remote research and all of these things. And it just got me thinking about whether the ways in which we do foundational research and think about it, whether they have evolved and whether they are still evolving, and what might happen in the future when it comes to how we conduct foundational research specifically. Have you pondered about this at all while we're all working from home and everything's kind of weird and difficult?
Yeah. So, when we initially started this phase of, oh my God, the world is ending, we all got an email saying, be careful about how much foundational research you're planning, because the world's in a crazy state right now. And I saw this also on Twitter and in chat groups and in other places. Everyone was saying, don't do foundational research right now because the world is weird. And I think that was a correct pause to take. But I also think that the world is not going to go back to an on-weird place. And so we're now at a phase where we can say, okay, we might have to, first of all, do things a little differently, but also put a slightly different lens on things and understand that the situation will continue to change. But I think that pause was important because no one was sure what was going on, and you don't want to be doing some like big needs assessment in the first week of lockdown if your needs assessment is on like shopping behaviors or something, or you're like, well, that's going to change tomorrow. But I do think that we can get back to foundational research because our world isn't going to be back to what it was, and we need to understand how this new reality impacts our users, and how can we help them? How can the things that we work on fit into this new reality and ease the ridiculous amounts of anxiety and discomfort that everyone's having?
I agree. And that makes me very optimistic and positive about our future as researchers, because we are in a new era. There's so much more to understand. Everything's different. There is plenty of work cut out for us, that's for sure. Let's end there. Kerry, thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining us. If you want to find Kerry, I recommend you check out her writings on Medium, and you can always contact her on Twitter at Kel_Moran. Anything you wanted to add, Kerry, about reaching out to you? What for? How? Anything else you wanted to plug before we end?
Yeah, those are my two main places. Both of those are great. Happy to see you there. And I'm happy to have conversations and ask questions and meet new friends.
Awesome. So thanks again. And hey, if you're looking for me, I'm at noamseg@gmail.com or at noamseg on Twitter or LinkedIn or wherever. And I'm also on YouTube these days having these conversations and doing a bunch of other things. So consider subscribing if you're interested for more updates to come. Thank you so much to Kelly, to everyone for watching. If we didn't get to your questions or you have anything for us, just email us or tweet and we will get back to you as soon as we can. Have a good evening. Stay safe. Stay healthy. Thanks very much. Bye for now.
Thanks, everyone.